Welcome to Mental Health Academics. Today we will discuss Guilford Structure of Intellect Theory. आज के इस लेक्चर में हम इंटेलिजेंस के एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट साइकोलॉजिकल थ्योरी को समझने वाले हैं जिसे स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ इंटेलेक्ट मॉडल या शॉर्ट फॉर्म में SOI मॉडल कहा जाता है. Before discussing the theory, let's understand the background and context of the theory. In the early phase of intelligence research, psychologists believed that intelligence was unitary in nature. The word unitary means single or one-dimensional. According to this view, intelligence was thought to be driven by one general mental ability. This idea was most strongly represented by Spearman's Z factor, where Z stands for general intelligence. Spearman believed that a single underlying ability influenced performance across all cognitive tasks. लेकिन जैसे जैसे रिसर्च आगे बढ़ी, साइकोलॉजिस्ट ने नोटिस किया ह्यूमन एबिलिटीज़ बहुत डाइवर्स होती है. लोग किसी एक एरिया में स्ट्रॉन्ग होते हैं और किसी दूसरे एरिया में कंपैरेटिवली वीक. इसी डिससेटिस्फैक्शन के रिजल्ट में मल्टी डायमेंशनल व्यूज़ ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस डेवलप होने लगे. वन इम्पोर्टेंट कंट्रीब्यूशन यहाँ आता है थर्स्टन का, जो हमने ऑलरेडी डिस्कस किया है रिगार्डिंग ग्रुप फैक्टर, जिन्होंने प्रपोज किया था. यानी इंटेलिजेंस को मल्टीपल प्राइमरी एबिलिटीज़ का कॉम्बिनेशन माना गया. डिस्पाइट दिस, रिसर्चर्स स्टिल फेल कि इंटेलिजेंस थ्योरीज ओवर सिंप्लीफाई हो रहे हैं. कॉम्प्लेक्स ह्यूमन थिंकिंग को या तो एक फैक्टर में या लिमिटेड ग्रुप्स फैक्टर में रिड्यूस किया जा रहा है. इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक सिस्टेमेटिक एंड कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव फ्रेमवर्क की ज़रूरत महसूस हुई. एक ऐसा फ्रेमवर्क जो ये एक्सप्लेन करे माइंड क्या करता है, किस टाइप की इंफॉर्मेशन पर काम करता है और कैसे रिजल्ट्स प्रोड्यूस करते हैं. यही से गिलफोर्ड का स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ इंटेलेक्ट मॉडल इमर्ज होता है, जो इंटेलिजेंस को डीपली स्ट्रक्चर्ड और मल्टी डायमेंशनल प्रोसेस के रूप में एक्सप्लेन करता है. लेट्स सी हु वाज J.P. Guilford. J.P. Guilford was an American psychologist who lived from 1897 to 1987. He worked during a very important period in psychology when intelligence, cognition and testing were being actively debated and redefined. इसका मतलब ये कि गिलफोर्ड ने इंटेलिजेंस थ्योरीज को उस टाइम चैलेंज किया जब सिंगल फैक्टर व्यूज डोमिनेंट थे. वी हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड फैक्टर एनालिसिस. फैक्टर एनालिसिस इज ए स्टैटिस्टिकल मेथड यूज्ड टू आइडेंटिफाई अंडरलाइंग एबिलिटीज और डायमेंशंस फ्रॉम टेस्ट डेटा. Guilford extensively used factor analysis to demonstrate that intelligence is made up of multiple distinct abilities, not just one general factor. यही से SOI मॉडल का साइंटिफिक बेस डेवलप होता है. Guilford was among the first psychologists to argue that creativity is a core part of intelligence. He showed that traditional intelligence tests largely ignore creative and divergent thinking abilities. इसीलिए गिलफोर्ड का काम सिर्फ इंटेलिजेंस तक लिमिटेड नहीं था, बल्कि उसने क्रिएटिविटी को मेनस्ट्रीम साइकोलॉजी का हिस्सा बनाया. Guilford was a strong critic of single factor theories. Now, what does this mean? Single factor theories assume that one general ability explains all intellectual performance. Guilford strongly opposed this view. He argued that such theories oversimplify human thinking and fail to capture the richness of cognitive abilities. This criticism directly led to the development of the structure of intellect model, which proposes a systematic and multidimensional view of intelligence. Let's understand the core assumption of the SOI model. Here, it is mentioned that intelligence is not unitary. The term unitary means single or one-dimensional. By saying intelligence is not unitary, Guilford rejected the idea that intelligence can be explained by one general mental ability such as IQ और Z फैक्टर. सिंपल टर्म्स में गिलफोर्ड का मानना था कि इंटेलिजेंस एक ही चीज नहीं होते. ह्यूमन थिंकिंग इज टू कॉम्प्लेक्स टू बी रिड्यूस टू ए सिंगल स्कोर और एबिलिटी. Intelligence composed of multiple independent abilities. According to Guilford, intelligence consists of many different abilities and these abilities are relatively independent. इंडिपेंडेंट का मतलब ये है कि एक एबिलिटी का लेवल दूसरी एबिलिटी के लेवल को ऑटोमेटिकली डिसाइड नहीं करता. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ए पर्सन मे बी वेरी गुड एट लॉजिकल रीजनिंग बट एवरेज इन क्रिएटिव थिंकिंग और स्ट्रॉन्ग इन वर्बल स्किल्स but weak in special tasks. Each ability represents a specific mental operations, contents and products. This is the core structural idea of SOI model. Guilford proposed that every intellectual ability can be understood as a combination of three elements. These are operations, content and product. We will discuss all of these in the later slide. Intellectual abilities can be systematically classified. The word systematically means in an organized and rule-based manner. Guilford believed that intelligence could be scientifically classified just like we classify elements or biological species. These assumptions allowed him to develop a structured model rather than a loose list of abilities. इसी वजह से SOI को एक क्लासिफिकेशन मॉडल ऑफ इंटेलिजेंस भी कहा जाता है. Guilford's SOI model emphasis on how information is processed, not just outcomes. This assumption highlights the philosophical shift in Guilford's thinking. Traditional intelligence tests focus mainly on final answers or test scores. Guilford emphasized the process of thinking, how information is perceived, remembered, transformed and evaluated. इसका मतलब ये है कि थिंकिंग प्रोसेस ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, सिर्फ रिजल्ट नहीं. दिस एजम्पशन लेटर बिकम वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इन कॉग्निटिव साइकोलॉजी एंड क्रिएटिविटी रिसर्च. सो लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड फ्रॉम द SOI perspective what is intelligence. Intelligence is a set of abilities that allow the individual to process information in multiple structured ways. So now let us understand its definition. According to Guilford, intelligence is not a single ability but a collection of abilities. The phrase multiple structured ways means that information processing in the mind follows organized and identifiable patterns, not random thinking. Intelligence focuses on mental operations, types of information, forms of outcomes. This line summarizes Guilford's entire model. He explained intelligence by focusing on three basic questions. What does the mind do? This refers to the mental operations. What kind of information is processed? This refers to contents. What is produced as a result? This refers to products. In short, Guilford defined intelligence as a process-oriented and structured system rather than just performance or scores. Now we will see the three-dimensional structure of Guilford SOI model. Guilford conceptualized intelligence as a three-dimensional cube. Now let us understand this idea briefly. Guilford proposed that intelligence has a three-dimensional structure, meaning it can be understood along three different directions or dimensions, not along in a single line. The three dimensions are, first one is operations. Operation is what the mind does. This dimension refers to the mental processes involved in thinking. In simple words, it answers the question, how does the mind work on information? Next is contents. Contents is the type of information. For example, information may be visual, verbal, symbolic or related to human behavior. Next one is products, the form of the output. Products describe how information is organized or expressed after mental processing. It answers the question, what is produced as a result of thinking? Each of these cells are equal to one distinct intellectual ability. This is the key idea of the model. Every intersection of one operation, one content, and one product forms one specific intellectual ability. So, intelligence, according to Guilford, is a systematic combination of many small abilities, not a single trait. Let's see the visual concepts of SOI cube. Intelligence represented as a matrix or cube. This means that Guilford represented intelligence visually in the form of a three-dimensional cube rather than a single line or scale. The word matrix here refers to an organized arrangement showing how different components of intelligence relate to each other. Each dimension intersects with the other two. This line explains the structure of the model. Each mental operation works together with a type of content and a type of product. No ability exists independently. Abilities are formed only at the point of intersection of these three dimensions. The original model proposed 120 abilities. The revised model expanded this to 150 abilities. This refers to the quantitative structure of the model. Initially, Guilford identified 120 distinct intellectual abilities. Later, after expanding the number of content categories, the model was revised to include 150 abilities. Each ability represents a specific and measurable form of thinking, defined by its position in the cube. Now, let us understand this cube diagram step by step. This diagram represents Guilford's structure of intellect model in a visual form. The cube shows that intelligence is not a single ability but a combination of three dimensions working together. These are the three dimensions: operations, products, and contents. Let us start with the vertical side on the left. This axis labeled as operations. Operations refer to what the mind does with information. Here we can see 5 operations listed, that are cognition, memory, divergent production, convergent production, and evaluation. These represent different mental processes such as understanding, remembering, generating ideas, finding correct answers, and judging accuracy. Now look at the horizontal base at the bottom. This axis is labeled as contents. Contents refers to the type of information the mind is working on. For example, information can be visual, auditory, symbolic, semantic, or related to human behavior. So this dimension answers the question, what kind of information is being processed? Next, look at the depth of the cube moving backward. This axis is labeled as products. Products describe the form in which information is organized or produced after mental processing. Examples include units, classes, relations, systems, transformations, and implications. Now, the most important idea is each small cube or cell inside this larger cube represents one specific intellectual ability. That ability is formed by one operation, one content, and one product coming together. So, intelligence according to Guilford is not one ability but a large system of many small well-defined abilities. This cube diagram helps us visually understand how thinking is structured and multidimensional rather than simple or one-dimensional. So let's understand the first dimension, that is operations. Operations refer to mental processes applied to information. In Guilford's model, operation means what the mind actually does with information. These are the basic thinking processes involved when we understand, remember, or solve problems. In simple words, operations answer one key question: mind information के साथ करता क्या है? The 5 core operations are cognition, memory, divergent production, convergent production, and evaluation. These 5 operations represents different types of mental ability, such as cognition refers to understanding and recognizing information. Memory refers to storing and recalling information. Divergent production involves generating many possible ideas or solutions. Convergent production involves finding one correct or best solution. Evaluation involves judging accuracy or correctness. At this stage, remember only one thing: operations are processes, not abilities themselves. They describe how thinking happens, not what the final answer is. We will look at each operation one by one in the next line. So the first operation is cognition. Cognition is discovery and understanding of information. Now let us understand what cognition means. The word cognition refers to the process of knowing. It involves becoming aware of information and making sense of it. In simple terms, cognition is about understanding. Awareness, recognition, comprehension. These three words describe the core of cognition. Awareness means becoming conscious of information. Recognition means identifying or noticing something as familiar. Comprehension means understanding the meaning of that information. यानी जब हम किसी चीज़ को पहली बार नोटिस करते हैं, पहचानते हैं और उसका मीनिंग समझते हैं, ये सब कॉग्निटिव प्रोसेसेस के अंदर आता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आइडेंटिफाइंग पैटर्न्स, रिकॉग्नाइजिंग मीनिंग्स, etc. This example makes the concept clear. When you identify a pattern, a shape, or understand the meaning of a word or sentence, you are using the operation of cognition. So, cognition is the starting point of thinking. Without understanding information first, memory, creativity, or evaluation cannot happen. Now, let us understand what memory means in Guilford's model. Memory refers to the mind's ability to store information and bring it back when needed. In simple words, memory answers the question, जो हमने सीखा है उसे हम याद रख पाते हैं या नहीं. It includes memory recording, memory retention. These are two important components of memory. Memory recording refers to initial storage of information. Memory retention refers to maintaining that information over time. यानी पहले information दिमाग में store होते हैं और फिर उसे कुछ टाइम बाद भी प्रिजर्व करके रखा जाता है. For example, recalling words, symbols, images. This example is straightforward. When you recall a word, a number, a symbol, or a picture that you learned earlier, you are using the operations of memory. So, in Guilford's model, memory is treated as a distinct mental process, separate from understanding or problem solving. So, the third core operation is divergent production. Divergent production is generation of multiple solutions. Now, let us understand what divergent production means. The word divergent means moving in different directions. So, divergent production refers to the ability to generate many possible ideas or solutions rather than just one. In simple terms, ये ऑपरेशन क्रिएटिव थिंकिंग से क्लोजली रिलेटेड है. Emphasis on creativity and fluency. Here, two important words are used. Creativity means producing new or original ideas, and fluency means producing many ideas smoothly and quickly. So, divergent production focuses on quantity and variety of ideas, not on whether the answer is right or wrong. For example, brainstorming, alternative use of objects, etc. When you do brainstorming or think of different use of a common object, for example, using a brick as a paperweight, a doorstop, or as a tool, you are engaging in divergent thinking. So, in Guilford's model, divergent production explains how creativity operates within intelligence. The fourth core of operation is convergent production. Convergent production is deriving one correct solution. The word convergent means coming together toward a single point. So, convergent production refers to the ability to arrive at one correct or best answer. इन सिंपल टर्म्स यहाँ थिंकिंग नैरो हो जाती है मल्टीपल ऑप्शन से एक फाइनल आंसर तक। कन्वर्जेंट प्रोडक्शन आर लॉजिकल रूल बेस्ड थिंकिंग। Convergent thinking follows logic, rules, and established procedures. There is usually one correct solution, and the task is to identify it accurately. इस टाइप की थिंकिंग एग्जाम्स और प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग में फ्रिक्वेंटली यूज होती है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, सॉल्विंग ए मैथ प्रॉब्लम और लॉजिकल puzzles. When you solve a mathematical problem or a logical puzzle, you are expected to reach one correct answer, not many possibilities. So, convergent production represents the analytical and accuracy focused side of intelligence. The fifth core of operations is evaluation. Evaluation is judging accuracy, consistency, or validity. Evaluation refers to the mental process of making judgments. It involves deciding whether information, an answer, or an idea is correct, logical, or acceptable. In simple terms, evaluation answers the question ये सही है या नहीं. Evaluation helps in decision making and critical thinking. Evaluation is closely linked to decision making, where we choose the best option among alternatives. It also involves critical thinking, which means carefully examining information before accepting it. यानी बिना सोचे समझे एक्सेप्ट करना इवैल्यूएशन नहीं होता है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, सिलेक्टिंग द बेस्ट आंसर फ्रॉम ऑल्टरनेटिव्स। व्हेन यू कंपेयर मल्टीपल ऑप्शंस एंड सिलेक्ट द मोस्ट एक्यूरेट और एप्रोप्रिएट आंसर, you are using the operation of evaluation. So, evaluation represents the judgment-oriented aspect of intelligence in Guilford's model. So now let's understand the second dimension of Guilford's model, that is contents. Contents refers to type of information being processed. So now let us understand what contents mean in Guilford's model. Contents refers to what kind of information the mind is working on. While operations describe how the mind works, content describes what the mind is thinking about. In simple words, content answer the question, mind किस type की information पर काम कर रहा है. There are 5 content categories. The information we see, information we hear, information represented by symbols, information that has meaning, information related to human behavior. At this stage, remember only one thing. Different types of information require different kind of thinking, and Guilford considered all of them important components of intelligence. Each of these contents type will now be explained one by one in the next slides. So let's see the first category of contents, that is visual content. Visual content is information perceived through sight. Visual content refers to information that we receive through our eyes. This includes anything that is seen rather than heard or spoken. In simple terms, जब हम किसी चीज़ को देखकर समझते हैं तो हम विजुअल कंटेंट प्रोसेस कर रहे होते हैं. Like images, shapes, spatial forms, these are examples of visual information. Visual content includes pictures, shapes, patterns, and spatial arrangements. That is how objects are positioned in space. For example, diagrams, maps, pictures. When you interpret a diagram, read a map, or understand a picture, you are working with visual content. So, in Guilford's model, visual content represents thinking based on what we see. The second category of content is auditory. Auditory content is information perceived through hearing. Auditory content refers to information that we receive through sound. This includes anything that is heard rather than seen or read. In simple words, जब हम सुनकर समझते हैं तो हम ऑडिटरी कंटेंट प्रोसेस कर रहे होते हैं. Sounds, tones, speech patterns, these are different forms of auditory information. Auditory content includes basic sounds, musical tones, and spoken language patterns. For example, music, spoken language, etc. When you listen to music or understand spoken words, you are working with auditory content. So, auditory content represents thinking based on what we hear. The third category of content is symbolic. Symbolic content, information represented by signs without inherent meaning. Symbolic content refers to signs or symbols that do not have meaning by themselves, but acquire meaning through social or learned conventions. In simple terms, symbols खुद से कुछ नहीं बताते, उनके मीनिंग हम सीख कर असाइन करते हैं. Numbers, letters, quotes, these are common example of symbolic content. Numbers and letters are symbols. For example, the number 5 or the letter A has no meaning on its own unless we understand the system behind it. For example, algebraic symbols, numerals, this example makes it very clear. When you work with mathematical symbols, formulas or numerical codes, you are processing symbolic content. So, symbolic content represents abstract, rule-based information used in thinking. The fourth category of content is semantic. Semantic content means meaningful verbal information. The word semantic relates to meaning. So, semantic contents refers to information that carries meaning, especially through language. In simple words, जब हम words का meaning समझते हैं तो हम semantic content process कर रहे होते हैं. Word, sentences, concepts, these are the basic elements of semantic content. Semantic contents includes individual words, complete sentences and broader concepts or ideas expressed through language. For example, reading comprehension, vocabulary. This example is very clear. When you understand what you read or know the meaning of the words, you are using semantic content. So, semantic content represents language-based, meaning-oriented thinking in Guilford's model. So, let's see the fifth category of contents, that is behavioral. Behavioral content is information derived from human actions and interactions. Behavioral content refers to information we get from observing people, their actions, reactions, expressions and interactions with others. In simple terms, जब हम लोगों के बिहेवियर को देखकर समझते हैं तो हम बिहेवियरल कंटेंट प्रोसेस कर रहे होते हैं. Social cues, expressions, intentions, these are key elements of behavioral informations. Social cues includes gestures, posture and tone. Expressions refers to facial expressions showing emotions. Intentions involve understanding what someone is trying to do or convey. ये सब इंफॉर्मेशन डायरेक्टली वर्ड्स में नहीं होते हैं बल्कि बिहेवियर से इन्फर की जाते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अंडरस्टैंडिंग इमोशंस, सोशल बिहेवियर etc. When you understand someone's emotions or interpret social behavior, you are working with behavioral content. So, behavioral content highlights the social and interpersonal aspects of intelligence in Guilford's model. So, let's understand the third dimension of Guilford's SOI model, that is products. Products refers to the form in which information is organized. Products describe what is produced after the mind processes information, while operations explain how thinking happens and contents explain what is being processed. Products explain the final form of that thinking. In simple terms, products answer the question, सोचने के बाद information किस फॉर्म में आते हैं. There are 6 types of products: units, classes, relations, systems, transformations, implications. These 6 products represent different ways in which information can be structured or organized. At this stage, you don't need to remember definitions in detail. Just understand that Guilford's believed thinking can produce single piece of information, groups, connections, complex systems, changes or conclusions. Each of these products type will now be explained one by one in the following slides. So now let's see what unit means. Unit is single piece of information. Unit refers to the smallest individual pieces of information that the mind can process. These are standalone elements not grouped or connected yet. In simple words, unit एक बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन होते हैं जैसे एक वर्ड, एक नंबर, एक सिंबल etc. When you recognize a single word or a single number, you're dealing with information at the level of unit. Now, the next is classes. Classes is grouping based on shared attributes. Classes are formed when multiple units are grouped together based on similarity. This grouping is done according to common features or characteristics. For example, categories, concepts. When we group dogs, cats, cows under the category of animal, or group apples, bananas under fruits, we are forming classes. So classes represents organized knowledge beyond single piece of information. The third category of products is relations. Connections between units. Relation refers to the links or connection between two or more units of information. Instead of looking at information separately, the mind focuses on how they are related. In simple terms, जब हम चीज़ों के बीच संबंध समझते हैं तो हम रिलेशंस प्रोसेस कर रहे होते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, एनालॉजीज opposites. When you understand an analogy or identify opposites like hot, cold or big, small, you are working with relations. The fourth category of product is system. Systems is complex organization of interrelated elements. System involve multiple units and relations organized together into a structured whole. This is more complex than simple relations. For example, grammar rules, theoretical models, etc. For example, grammar is a system of rules and a scientific theory is a system of related concepts. So, system represents highly organized and structured thinking. The fifth category of products is transformation. Transformations, changes and or modifications of information. Transformations refers to situations where information is changed, altered or restructured in some way. The basic information remains the same, but its form or arrangement is modified. In simple terms, जब हम इंफॉर्मेशन को रिवर्स, रीअरेंज या मॉडिफाई करते हैं तो हम ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस प्रोसेस कर रहे होते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल, रिवर्सिंग, रीऑर्डरिंग, जैसे कि रिवर्सिंग ए वर्ड, रीऑर्डरिंग नंबर्स और मेंटली रोटेटिंग एन ऑब्जेक्ट्स, ऑल इन्वॉल्व transforming information, not just recalling it. The last one is implications. Implications are predictions or inferences. Implications refers to conclusions that go beyond the given information. They involve predicting outcomes or drawing logical inferences. जैसे कि logical conclusions, future outcomes. For example, if you predict what will happen next based on current information or draw a logical conclusions from facts, you are using implications. So, implications represent the highest level of intellectual output, where thinking moves beyond what is directly given. So, we have covered all the 3 dimensions of Guilford SOI model. So, now let's see the total intellectual abilities of Guilford SOI model. In the original model, there are 4 contents, 5 operations and 6 products. That is lead to like 120 total abilities. In Guilford's original structure of intellects model, there were 4 types of content. When these 4 content were combined with 5 operations and 6 products, the total number of distinct intellectual abilities came to 120. Each ability represents a unique way of thinking formed by one operation, one content and one product. Later, the revised model came, where he added one more content category, making the total contents 5. As a result, the revised model includes 150 distinct intellectual abilities, where each cell is equal to one measurable mental ability. Each cell of SY cube represents one specific and measurable intellectual ability. So, intelligence, according to Guilford, is not a vague concept but a systematic collection of clearly defined abilities. So let's take an example of a single SOI ability. The task is just recall a list of words. Now let us understand this example. This task is very simple. You are asked to remember and recall words that you have learned earlier. So here the content semantic, because words carry meaning. You are not just recalling sounds or symbols but meaningful verbal information. Next operation is memory. The operation involved here is memory because the task requires retention and recall of information. You are not generating new ideas or evaluating answers. You are simply remembering what was learned earlier. Next is product. The product is units because you are recalling individual words, not categories, relations, or systems. Semantic memory for units. So when we combine semantic content, memory operations, and unit as product, we get the specific intellectual ability, semantic memory for units. This slide clearly shows how one cell of SOI cube represents one well-defined mental ability. Let's understand the contribution of SOI model to creativity research. Clear distinction between divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Guilford was one of the first psychologists to make a clear theoretical distinction between divergent and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking focuses on generating many possible ideas, whereas convergent thinking focuses on arriving at one correct solution. इस डिस्टिंक्शन ने क्रिएटिविटी को इंटेलिजेंस के फ्रेमवर्क के अंदर लेजिटिमेट प्लेस बना दिया. Measure impact on creativity testing. This distinction had a strong impact on how creativity was studied and measured. Traditional intelligence tests mainly measured convergent thinking. Guilford's work showed that creative abilities cannot be captured by IQ test alone. As a result, new creativity tests were developed that focused on idea fluency, flexibility, and originality. It influenced modern creativity assessments. Many modern tools used to assess creativity are based on Guilford's ideas, especially his emphasis on divergent production. So, Guilford's contribution goes beyond intelligence theory. It fundamentally shaped creativity research in psychology. Let's understand the strength of SOI model. Guilford's SOI model was comprehensive and systematic. Guilford's model is considered comprehensive because it covers a wide range of intellectual abilities. It is systematic because these abilities are organized in a clear, structured framework. यानी इंटेलिजेंस को रैंडम लिस्ट की तरह नहीं बल्कि एक वेल ऑर्गेनाइज्ड सिस्टम के रूप में एक्सप्लेन किया गया है. Guilford SOI model moves beyond over-reliance on IQ scores. Traditional approaches focused heavily on IQ scores. Guilford's model showed that इंटेलिजेंस कैनॉट बी फुल्ली कैप्चर्ड बाय ए सिंगल नंबर. इसीलिए ये मॉडल इंटेलिजेंस को ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव से समझने में मदद करता है. Guilford's model emphasizes cognitive processes. The SOI model focuses on how thinking happens, not just final answers. It highlights processes like understanding, remembering, generating ideas, and evaluating, which are central to cognitive psychology. Stimulated extensive research. Because of its detailed structure, Guilford's model encouraged large-scale research in intelligence, creativity, and cognitive abilities. So even critics acknowledge its major contribution to psychological research. Let's see the criticism of SOI model. The first one is excessive fragmentation of intelligence. One major criticism of Guilford's model is that it breaks intelligence into too many small abilities. Critics argue that dividing intelligence into 150 separate abilities may make the model too complex. Simple words में इंटेलिजेंस को इतना ज़्यादा पीसेस में तोड़ देना कभी कभी प्रैक्टिकल अंडरस्टैंडिंग को डिफ़िकल्ट बना देता है. Many abilities are highly correlated. Studies have shown that many abilities proposed in the SOI model are strongly correlated with each other. कोरिलेशन का मतलब होता है कि एबिलिटीज कंप्लीटली इंडिपेंडेंट नहीं होती. बिकॉज ऑफ दिस सम रिसर्चर्स आर्ग्यू दैट द मॉडल ओवर एस्टिमेट्स द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ एबिलिटीज. डिफिकल्ट टू ऑपरेशनलाइज ऑल 150 एबिलिटीज. Here the important word is operationalize. Operationalize means to define something in a way that it can be measured. Critics point out that it is very difficult to design tests that accurately measure all 150 abilities proposed by Guilford. Next one is limited predictive validity for real life outcomes. Predictive validity means how well a theory or test can predict real life performance, such as academic success or job effectiveness. Some critics believe that SOI model has limited ability to predict real world outcomes, especially when compared to simpler intelligence measures. Let's compare Guilford's theory with other earlier theories. Guilford's theory rejects Spearman's single G. Spearman proposed that intelligence is based on one general factor called G. Guilford clearly rejected this idea. According to Guilford, human intelligence cannot be explained by a single general ability. Instead, it consists of many distinct intellectual abilities, more detailed than Thurston's primary mental abilities, which we have already discussed in the last lecture. Thurston proposed primary mental abilities, which included multiple abilities, but the number and structure were limited. Guilford's model is more detailed and systematic because it clearly specifies operations, contents, and products to define each ability. Differs from Gardner by being factor analytic. Gardner theory is based largely on clinical observations and cultural evidence. We will discuss Gardner's theory in the later videos. Guilford's model, on the other hand, is based on factor analysis and psychometric research. इसीलिए गिलफोर्ड का अप्रोच सिस्टेमेटिकली ग्राउंडेड माना जाता है, primarily psychometric rather than contextual. The word psychometric refers to measurement using psychological test. Guilford focused on measuring and classifying abilities rather than studying intelligence in social or cultural contexts. So, compared to other theories, the structure of intellect model is measurement oriented in nature. Let's summarize the whole theory. Intelligence is multidimensional. This line captures the core idea of Guilford's theory. According to the SOI model, intelligence is not a single ability but a collection of many different abilities working together. SOI model organizes abilities systematically. Guilford did not just list abilities randomly, he organized them using a clear and logical structure based on operations, contents, and products. This systematic organization makes the model scientifically strong and conceptually clear. Three dimensions explain mental functioning. These three dimensions explain how the mind processes information, what type of information is involved, and what form the outcome takes. Together, they provide a complete picture of human thinking. His theory's landmark contribution to the intelligence theory. The key takeaway is Guilford shifted intelligence research from a how smart are you to how do you think. Instead of focusing only on scores or outcomes, Guilford redirected attention to thinking processes. That shift continues to influence modern psychology and education. Thank you for watching.